So it's another beautiful morning here in Hawaii, and I've been starting each day on vacation with some coffee and beat making on Koala, because this $5 app keeps surprising me with how many music production features it packs into any phone or tablet. So today I thought we'd go through a full session. Let's get into it. Let's take a look at some of the samples we're going to use. We've got some drums we'll chop. Our first melodic sample. I think this will work well chopped, and then I had to grab some sounds from the Henry Mancini vinyl I got a few sample flips ago. All right, so let's start our beat by chopping up some drums. So I'm gonna use auto chop, and I'm actually gonna use the transients chop. Typically I do equal, but today I was feeling transient, and then move it around a little bit, and here's what we got. So then I want all of these in a mute group, and I'm gonna hold down the edit button and just press all of the ones that I wanna put in that group. And then first thing I'm going to do though is actually set the one shot on and then put on the choke group or mute group. If I press sample pad, it's going to play the whole sample even if I take my finger off before it ends. That's the one shot. And then the choke group means when you hit the next one, it will stop the previous one from playing. So let's record in some drums. So that's a little sloppy, but I think we can go in and move some stuff around. But I'm also going to try adding a couple other drums, because sometimes when you have a choke group, you can get interesting little micro sounds as one starts and one gets choked. That should work. But let's go in and we'll go into the piano roll and just move some things around. Sometimes a drum beat, you can kind of feel where it's going, but it's just not right where you want it. And so then I'll go in and make some changes and just kind of tweak which sound is being hit at what time. Yeah, that'll work. All right, so let's move this sample over and we'll chop this one up. I'm gonna do the same thing with auto chop, but this time I think we'll set it to equal, which just sets an equal number of chops that we can then move around and add more if we want to. And we're gonna need to do the same thing and highlight everything, put them all in a mute group or a choke group, and also do the one shot. I like doing this one shot because I like not having to hold down a pad for as long as I want it to play. I can let go, but then the mute group gets it to stop playing. So now we just need to find a part. And I think the drums, because these are at a different BPM, are a little off, so we're just gonna lower it a little bit. And then I'm gonna use some stretch on a couple of these to get some interesting artifacting. Okay, I think we're on to something with this. I like that sound, so let's record something. All right, that should work, but that second bar is a little bit messy, so I think we'll go in and make some changes. I feel like maybe having something at the start might work, so I'm changing the pitch around a little bit to see if I can use that as like the first note. But actually I think that one's better. Or that one even. So then I'm going to go in, there was already some program, so we'll go in the piano roll, take those off, put in something new on top. All right, so that second one is kind of messy. So what I'm going to do is actually just change the bar length to 2 and then double that, and that'll get rid of the second one, and it'll just duplicate that original one. All right, now we've got that Henry Mancini. Let's try and find the right pitch. That might work. So what I do when I'm trying to find the pitch is just go off of what sounds good when the other part is playing. But as long as you think it sounds good, that should work. And then I'm gonna stretch that so it fits. Because if we use that time stretch, it can get some really interesting artifacts, but also get some really cool micro timings on ideas like this where it's more of an arpeggio. Then I'm just finding a different arpeggio, like a different set of notes. And then I'm going to tweak the pitch around a little bit and see what we get. That might work. But there's only one way of knowing, so let's record this in and see what we get when we put it all together. Yeah, I think that works. All right, so then what we're gonna do is start doing some bus effects. So if we go and set these two different bus effects, this one is, you actually need to update Koala, and I think it's another 10 or 15 bucks to get the piano roll and the bus effects, but it's definitely worth it. But we're gonna put all of these into different bus effects. And I'm putting actually the two melodic layers into different bus effects, and I'll explain why in a second. But let's start getting the drums. I always go, you'll see this is a recurring theme, I'm always gonna add bit cooker to pretty much everything because I love that low resolution sound. And then for the drums, sometimes I like to put a little drive on, and you can even lower the mix so that it's just there a little bit. I'm also going to do some compression. I really want to glue those drums together, make them sound really gritty and old school. And then of course on the main sound, bit cooker, always, it just gives it that kind of classic sampler sound. And since we're working in Koala digitally, I love just having that. It just gives it a little more grit and just feel. And then I always love putting delay on my melodic sounds, especially on a sampler that can sidechain to the drums, which we can in Koala, because you get all of these kind of bouncing sounds that move around, but then they're tethered by that sidechain duck, which we'll get into in a second, but it just bounces under the drums and then comes back. Then of course some reverb to add some glue and just kind of tail to the sound. And here comes the sidechain. So yeah, with the sidechain, this is really gonna let it sit and bounce. All right, so I put the other melodic sound on a different bus because they're actually kind of panned left and right. That was unintentional, but I think with some different effects, we can get some really cool stereo sound going on, and just move around the stereo field. I'm thinking ear candy, and so different kinds of delays and things like that. And then of course another sidechain. And I'm actually setting these sidechains slightly different from each other. They're both set to the drums, but I think the Hawaii sample is a much more pronounced sidechain effect. And then sometimes if you set the reverb after the sidechain, you get some really interesting tail to the sidechain duck. So I like to do that sometimes as well. All right, so I think the samples sound good. So the last thing we need to do is start doing some Quokka sounds. We need a bass and a lead. So we're gonna design a bass really quickly. And if you need some synth recipes to get started on Quokka synth, check out my Koala Sampler cheat sheet and quick start guide. The link is in the description. And so I'm gonna add some mod to the pitch, which is gonna give it more of an attack. And then I just can never seem to do the grid when it's chromatic, so I'm gonna use the keyboard and I'm just gonna find what key this song is in now. It seems like it's in some form of D. It doesn't really matter. Just find the notes that sound good and then you can use those. And I'm sticking at a higher octave to start, and then I'm gonna lower it. And I'm just gonna make a couple more tweaks and then we'll record it in. I wanna make it monophonic and I want glide so it can kind of bounce around. There we go. So let's record that. perfect. Now, one thing with Quokka is it's only a 1 oscillator synth. I would love to make a duplicate of this and drop it another octave, maybe make more of a sub bass with a triangle waveform. But this is just a quick beat making session in Hawaii, and I'm typically lazy, so I'm not doing that. But I do have a video that talks all about how you can do that. I'll link that up there and in the description if you want to check it out. But if you just kind of mess with the filter, and you can always set this to a bus effect and up the low end, it'll sound good. But yeah, definitely having 2 oscillators would be nice, but you can just copy all the information in the piano roll, move it over, and that works as well. So we're just making some final tweaks though, getting the sound dialed in. So then we're gonna set it to a bus effect, and we're gonna add a little bit of drive to get some more high end. But I'm dropping the mix because I don't want a lot of it. That can easily really clip. And then of course we're gonna want sidechain. Sidechain everything. It just gives everything a bounce. And then it's time to get a lead. You'd be surprised how good a bass patch can sound when you up it a couple octaves and make a couple changes to the filter, maybe add some reverb and delay, which we'll do with a bus effect. And that becomes a pretty solid lead sound. Now, yeah, I'm changing the ADSR a little bit, and I'm also adding some LFO to the pitch. So it's gonna create a little bit more warble, something Boards of Canada do a lot. But we'll put that into the bus effect, and I'm gonna put that on bus A, but you could set it to any of them. But I really want all the things I've done with bus A. Listen to that though. So we'll record that in, but the biggest difference from the bass and this lead, aside from octave, is a little change in the filter, the LFO obviously on the pitch, but also I added a lot more attack so that there's more of a fade in of the sound, whereas on the bass I wanted that pronounced attack. And then I'm just using the volume to let it sit in the mix a little bit better. All right, so let's check out some master effects. Now, I typically like to add effects on the master. Bit Cooker, even though we've got Bit Cooker on everything, I still put some on there. I really want it to sound old school and just gritty, but you definitely do not need the Bit Cooker. Compression, always recommended. You can tweak it around. I don't like to go when I'm mastering above a ratio of 2. And then I want a really long attack and release, and then you can mess with the threshold to taste. I'm not doing too much here, I just wanted a little glue. And then we're gonna throw on a limiter, and that's just gonna bring everything up. There we go. Oh, and I forgot we need an EQ. I always like to up or tame some frequencies, so I'm gonna put an EQ above the compressor, but after the Bit Cooker. So we'll up the low end a little bit, up the high end a little bit, and then just take down just a little bit in some mid-range mud. Yeah, I'm doing this quick just to kind of get something going. And then the last thing we need to do is some arrangement. So I'm gonna go in, I just copy the pattern, you just drag it over up on the patterns, and then you can go into the piano roll and take out different parts, but you still have the original version copied a few times, so you can make a full sequence. So like for this part, let's just do that main melodic parts, and then we'll take out the bass and the drums and all of that, and then we'll make a second pattern that has the bass and the drums brought in, but we'll take out the lead, and then the third pattern will have the lead. So this is one way to quickly arrange a sort of performance, but you can still have it be interactive, where you're changing things. Typically, I like to have the SP to do effects, because I'm not the biggest fan of the performance effects in Koala. They just, I don't know, for me it doesn't work, but I'd love to hear if you use the performance effects a lot. Let me know if you have any tips and tricks or things I should check out, but typically I stick with the SP for the live performance effects. And that's everything. I appreciate you hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to see more Koala beat making, check out this video next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.